Just weeks ago, the world watched as U.S. AFRICOM Commander General Michael Langley made a bold accusation, claiming that President Ibrahim Traoré was using Burkina Faso's gold to protect himself. At the same time, traitors, fugitives who plotted to destabilize Traoré's government, fled across the border. Their destination, Ivory Coast. And now, those two forces have aligned. General Langley recently met with the president of Ivory Coast, and out of that meeting came one chilling decision: the plan to establish a U.S. military base near Burkina Faso and Mali.
In a move that's sending shockwaves across West Africa, the Ivory Coast, with the backing of U.S. General Langley, has just opened a new military base dangerously close to Burkina Faso's borders.
And now shifting focus to West Africa, where the United States is significantly bolstering its military partnership with the Ivory Coast as a part of a strategic recalibration of its presence in West Africa. Now, this development comes in the wake of the U.S. military withdrawal from Niger and amidst growing instability across the Sahel region. Reports suggest that discussions are underway for the potential establishment of a U.S. drone base in Ivory Coast's Abidjan city.
Is this a strategic alliance or a calculated trap in a region already simmering with tension? As regional powers watch closely and rumors swirl of upcoming coups and power plays, this base could change the balance of influence forever. What's really going on behind the scenes, and who stands to gain or lose from this bold military move?
So it is happening. Côte d'Ivoire has authorized the United States of America to establish a military drone base in the land. Now look at the map. This is Côte d'Ivoire. What do you see in the north? There's Burkina Faso, there's Mali. So a lot of people are very worried about this. What's the goal to this? Are they trying to destabilize Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger? Is this a strategy? We're going to get through this. We're going to establish what's really happening here. So U.S. Marine Corps General Langley, commander of AFRICOM, visited Côte d'Ivoire a few times in 2024, with documented trips in April and May to strengthen U.S. and Ivory security cooperation and discuss establishment of U.S. drone base. To do what? To counter regional terrorism.
Strategic location: Ivory Coast's military base near Burkina Faso. When examining the map of West Africa, Ivory Coast's decision to open a joint military base with the United States near Burkina Faso in 2025 raises significant questions. This is far from a routine military partnership. It carries deep strategic weight. The base, reportedly named after U.S. General Langley, is located in a highly sensitive area characterized by instability and insurgency. Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast's immediate neighbor, has experienced a sharp increase in violence fueled by jihadist groups, alongside a wave of military coups. The site lies at a critical crossroads, where the Sahel region meets coastal West Africa, a corridor frequently exploited by militants, traffickers, and political opportunists. The base's proximity to Burkina Faso is intentional, sending a clear message and reflecting a high-stakes tactical decision. Ivory Coast, historically one of the more stable countries in the region, is now stepping onto a volatile chessboard. Hosting a U.S. military facility inevitably increases foreign presence and influence, which presents both opportunities and risks. On the positive side, the base offers enhanced security cooperation, improved intelligence sharing, and a stronger front against terrorism. However, it also risks casting Ivory Coast as a proxy battlefield for external powers whose interests may not fully align with Africa's own priorities. In essence, this move illustrates the delicate balance Ivory Coast must navigate between strengthening regional security and maintaining sovereignty without becoming entangled in broader geopolitical rivalries. Regional implications: shifting power dynamics in West Africa. This move changes the balance of power in West Africa, no doubt. For years, the Sahel region, including Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, has been a hotspot for jihadist insurgency and political upheaval. The West African countries, ECOWAS, and the African Union have tried multiple strategies to stabilize the region, but the crisis deepens. The arrival of a US-backed military base in Ivory Coast signals an escalation in international involvement.
During his visit, General Langley, along with the U.S. Ambassador Jessica Davis, held crucial meetings with the Ivorian Minister of Defense, Tene Birima Katara, and the Chief of Defense Staff, Lieutenant General Lassina Doumbia. Now, discussions centered on strengthening bilateral cooperation to effectively address transnational threats, with a clear emphasis on Ivory Coast's expanding role as a leader in regional security. Talks also included the potential establishment of a U.S. drone base within the Ivory Coast. While no final decision on constructing a permanent base has been made, high-level consultations are actively ongoing regarding the expansion of U.S. operations.
To many Africans watching, this looks like an external power trying to tighten its grip under the guise of security cooperation. The U.S. has been involved in counterterrorism in the Sahel through drone strikes and training local forces, but without enduring success. Establishing a base so close to Burkina Faso sends a clear signal to both allies and adversaries. The U.S. is committed to expanding its footprint in Africa. But at what cost? Ivory Coast's military and political elites may view this base as a way to boost their own security apparatus and leverage U.S. power for regional influence. However, neighboring countries could see it as a threat or provocation, further destabilizing an already fragile environment. The risk of backlash from local insurgents or disaffected groups could increase, making Ivory Coast a target rather than a sanctuary.
Ancient African proverb, and right now, something is happening in Ivory Coast that proves just how powerful united webs can become. On May 21, 2025, social media exploded with reports of chaos in Abidjan. Videos of protesters flooding the streets, claims of internet shutdowns, whispers of military movements, allegations of coup attempts that could change everything. But then, silence. Major news outlets stayed quiet. International media looked the other way. It's just like someone pressed the mute button on an entire nation's cry for freedom.
The question of sovereignty and African agency. This situation also raises serious questions about African sovereignty and agency. For decades, African nations have wrestled with foreign military bases on their soil, relics of colonialism or Cold War-era interventions. Now, in 2025, the presence of a U.S. base named after a high-ranking American general feel like a throwback to those times. It triggers a debate on whether African nations are choosing these partnerships freely or if they are pressured by geopolitical interests. Ivory Coast is at a crossroads between asserting independence and leaning on powerful allies. The base may bring much-needed military resources and training to combat terrorism, but it also risks making Ivory Coast dependent on external military power. This dependency can limit the country's freedom to pursue independent policies, especially if U.S. strategic interests do not fully align with those of the host nation. Furthermore, this development may fuel skepticism among African youth and civil society who demand genuine African-led solutions to African problems. They might question whether the military base is truly for regional security or if it serves foreign powers' ambitions. The long history of military interventions and resource exploitation in Africa adds weight to these concerns. Security realities on the ground, threats and challenges. Security in the border region near Burkina Faso is precarious. Jihadist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS have exploited weak governance, porous borders, and ethnic tensions to establish strongholds. These armed groups carry out attacks on military installations, villages, and civilians, creating a climate of fear and displacement. The new base is meant to act as a force multiplier for counterterrorism operations, a hub for intelligence gathering, rapid deployment, and logistical support. Yet, the nature of insurgency in the Sahel is complex. Militants blend with local communities, operate in remote areas, and benefit from regional grievances. A foreign military base, even with advanced technology and personnel, faces an uphill battle. The terrain itself is a challenge, vast, arid, and difficult to monitor. Moreover, the local population's trust is fragile. Military presence without community engagement risks alienating those the forces intend to protect. If the base is seen as an occupying force rather than a partner, it could drive recruitment to militant groups, turning the operation into a trap rather than a solution.
Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are the real brothers because they have the same mentality. They want to work for the people. They want their countries to be free of neo-colonialism. They don't want anything to do with France. What do they have in common? They were all colonized by France. They rejected France altogether, and they quit ECOWAS, which is ECOWAS. This is ECOWAS. You see this block of countries, they call ECOWAS. They used to be all 15 countries, working with one another, helping each other, not really helping each other, but allowing one another to traverse to the next country without using a visa. But even though sometimes you get to the passports section, they will still ask you for money to pay for visa. But that's how they lie to each other with the fake brotherhood.
Diplomatic ripples, reactions across the region and beyond. The opening of this military base has stirred diplomatic reactions not only within West Africa, but also from other global players. France, historically dominant in Francophone Africa, might view this as a challenge to its influence. Paris has already faced resistance and criticism over its military operations in the Sahel. The US expanding its role in Ivory Coast signals a possible realignment of power and resources away from traditional actors. Regional neighbors like Ghana, Mali, and Niger are watching closely. While some may welcome enhanced security cooperation, others worry about foreign encroachment and the risk of escalating tensions. The presence of a joint military base near Burkina Faso could shift regional dynamics, stirring unease among certain countries. The African Union and ECOWAS face the challenge of promoting partnerships that strengthen security while protecting regional autonomy. They must also work to prevent conflicts among member states, ensuring cooperation does not deepen divisions or instability. On a global scale, powers like China and Russia, who have been increasing their presence in Africa economically and militarily, might see this base as part of a broader geopolitical contest. Their interest could counterbalance or complicate US efforts, making Ivory Coast a focal point for competing influences.
We have major breaking news. Sad news, if I may say. Take a look at this. The news says United States have successfully signed deal with Côte d'Ivoire government to establish military drone base in their country.
The risk of becoming a pawn in global politics. For Ivory Coast, the opening of the US General Langley base near Burkina Faso presents a delicate tightrope walk. While the country seeks stability and security, it risks becoming a pawn in a larger game of global politics. The base could be exploited to project US military power into the Sahel and beyond, using Ivory Coast's territory as a launchpad for operations that might not always align with local interests. This risk is amplified by the often opaque nature of foreign military agreements. Civilians and even some local leaders may remain uninformed about the full scope and limits of the base's mission. Such secrecy breeds suspicion and resentment. If operations from the base trigger collateral damage or exacerbate conflicts, the backlash will be swift and harsh. The military presence could also make Ivory Coast a target for retaliation from extremist groups or rival powers. History shows that foreign bases in unstable regions often attract attacks or sabotage, turning peaceful host countries into hotspots of violence. Economic considerations, development or dependency. A frequently overlooked aspect of military bases is their economic impact on the host country. The Ivory Coast hopes the base will bring jobs, infrastructure investment, and economic stimulus, particularly in remote areas. Local businesses might benefit from contracts, and the presence of foreign troops can boost commerce. However, this economic uplift may be short-lived or uneven. Military bases tend to create enclaves that are disconnected from broader national development. The profits often flow back to foreign contractors or the military itself, rather than fueling sustainable growth. Moreover, the base might divert government attention and resources away from long-term social and economic development goals. Reliance on military partnerships for security can reduce the urgency to address root causes of instability, such as poverty, corruption, and lack of education. The human element, impact on local communities. The presence of a large foreign military base affects more than just geopolitics and economics. It changes the lives of people living nearby. Communities near the base might face displacement, restrictions on movement, and cultural tensions. The arrival of foreign troops brings new social dynamics and potential frictions. In some cases, there may be positive exchanges, employment opportunities, improved infrastructure, and enhanced security. But in others, Communities could experience militarization of their environment, with checkpoints, surveillance, and occasional clashes. Additionally, local youth and potential recruits to armed groups may feel caught between the government's military presence and extremist recruiters. Their grievances over land, opportunity, and identity must be understood and addressed alongside security efforts. The trap question: is this a strategic win or a long-term snare? The question of whether the base in Ivory Coast is a trap is complex. On one side, Ivory Coast and the US aim to assert control over a volatile region, intending to curb the spread of violent extremism and safeguard their strategic interests. The base provides tactical advantages, critical resources, and signals a strong commitment to regional security. This partnership could bolster Ivory Coast's role as a regional leader and enhance its capacity to respond to emerging threats. However, the risks are significant. The presence of a foreign military base may draw Ivory Coast deeper into ongoing conflicts, increasing its reliance on external powers and potentially undermining its sovereignty. It could also provoke resentment among local communities and neighboring countries, who may view the base as an infringement on autonomy or a source of instability. Moreover, the base could become a target for extremist attacks, turning it into a flashpoint that fuels further insecurity. Ultimately, whether this move strengthens Ivory Coast's position or becomes a strategic snare depends on multiple factors. Transparent governance, meaningful community engagement, balanced diplomacy, and a clear African-led vision for peace and development are crucial. Only with these elements in place can the base serve as a foundation for lasting stability rather than a catalyst for further turmoil. African solutions for African challenges. What this moment really demands is an African-led approach that combines security with development, respects sovereignty, and avoids foreign entanglements that don't serve the continent's long-term interests. The Ivory Coast base could be part of that if managed with wisdom and partnership, not simply as a foothold for foreign military ambitions. As Africans, we must watch closely, question openly, and insist on solutions that empower our people rather than make us pawns. The future of West Africa depends on our ability to navigate these challenges with unity, strength, and dignity. The establishment of this military base could be the start of a new chapter in West African geopolitics, one filled with cooperation, conflict, or something far more complex. With Ibrahim Traoré rising and neighboring countries on edge, the stakes have never been higher. What do you think? Is this a clever strategy for peace and security, or a dangerous trap waiting to be sprung? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for the latest updates on this unfolding story.